Welcome to the Sound and Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeanna Isham, owner and founder of Dreamr Productions and Sound in Marketing Learning. I create, consult, and educate brands and individuals on the power of sound in marketing. For this season, I wanted to focus on definitions because if you don't fundamentally understand the industry, it's harder to navigate it and harder to ultimately succeed. And that's why every episode will start with what is. Today, we will be defining dynamic ads with my very special guest, Sam Crowther of A Million Ads. Sam is an experienced creative director in broadcast radio with both Global and Bauer, Europe's two largest groups. He is now leading the creative development of the world's first dynamic, personalized digital audio campaigns with ad tech startup A Million Ads. Since launching in 2015, A Million Ads has revolutionized audio advertising with dynamic poems, songs, DCO, listener name, dynamic music, accents, and binaural mixing across dozens of international markets with a direct music streaming, radio, podcast, and programmatic integrations. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you very much for having me.
I hope I said that right. Binaural?
Binaural. Well, everyone's calling it 3D audio at the moment, so maybe that's easier, isn't it?
Okay. Got it. Yes, there's so many definitions now. And again, that's why I start each episode with what is, because it's so easy to get lost in all that there is. And there's a lot. And I'm realizing more and more every single day with my research. It's fascinating. Why don't we go ahead and just start with your personalization of you and your company?
Like you said, my whole career up to recently was in broadcast radio in the creative side. So writing, producing, pitching, talking about the power of sound right from the sort of late 1990s when I started my career. And it seemed logical to talk about the power of sound because way back then, like salespeople at radio stations would say radio is this amazing advertising medium, and then say, we're going to show you loads of slides now and wait till you see the brand video. And we used to think, well, that's kind of crazy. If you're a creative, like the medium is the message. So we kind of developed a power of sound presentation. And then one of my previous colleagues that I worked on a brand called XFM in the UK, Steve Dunlop, founded A Million Ads, I think in sort of 2015. And he invited me to sort of join and help launch it. And he'd developed a bit of software that allows the creation of huge numbers of ads, so you can do personalization and then deliver those ads to the right person at the right time in the right place, listening to the right bit of content or what have you. And then since then, we've been serving campaigns, and it's been growing exponentially. We have integrations in the US with Pandora and people like that. We also have programmatic integrations, so we can serve ads through things like the Trade Desk and AdsWiz, people like that. And we're always pushing the boundaries of what personalization means. So that's kind of brings us up to the present day, I guess.
You struck a chord for me when you said that it is dependent on the medium, the platform that you're using. And, up until, not long ago, maybe 15 years, the medium of choice was TV. So you were sold to just by broadcast advertising, and you had your visual and your sound modalities. And that was just it. Like that was where you were. But now, my gosh, I can't even keep track with the internet and streaming and all of these mobile devices. And I mean, now there's like interactive billboards, like it's everywhere. It's just all the different mediums. You can't keep track. And so you can't just copy and paste a TV ad and put it on radio or put it on XYZ. And that's why I think the personalization is so imperative.
When I present, I talk about the sort of psychology, and I know that you're fascinated in this area as well. So the reason I have such an interest in it is because I'm bizarrely, being kind of my whole career being in audio, I'm actually mono-aural. So I've spent my entire life only hearing out of one ear. And that I always argue that gave me an advantage because I had a very conscious awareness of what sound means right from when I was essentially born, or when I started thinking about it, because I had to go to hearing tests And actually my reading and writing was pretty slow in my early school days. And my dad thought that a musical education would help, and it did, because there is a theory that the two hemispheres of a brain have a bias towards factual or emotional information through the left and right ear. So actually my brain was having to readjust to that new reality and everything coming from one side. And but a musical education helped, and because music stimulates the entirety of the brain, as you know. And so I've always been consciously aware of sound, what it means, and I also then had a musical education. So most people who are conscious of sound are quite often musicians themselves, or actors as well. Actors get that training in voice delivery, but musicians particularly. So I've always had that fascination of the sort of psychology of communication and sound.
I did check out your TEDx, so I heard about that. It's fascinating. I think that like when you're lacking something, you're more aware of it when it's around. I don't know, maybe that's total BS, but so let's, we've been talking for a little bit, but let's flat out define it. What is a dynamic ad?
So a dynamic ad is one where the line, so if you think about a radio ad, an audio ad, you have a music bed, perhaps you might have some sound effects, and then you'll have different voice lines. They could be multiple voices or they could be a single voice. Any of those elements in that ad can change by data that is known about the listener at the time that the ad is served. So what that means is, so if you take the music bed, if they're listening to a hip hop playlist on Pandora or Spotify, we could put in a hip hop bed to make it sound like it's right for them, or a classical bed if they're listening to classical music. The sound effects could be related to the time of day. Let's say you could have birdsong or the weather conditions or what have you. So we look up things like location from IP address. We can also then do the API lookup for weather. We can do, wind speeds, all the things that you get from your weather app, essentially, the weather condition. And then we can do things around the device, so how you're connected to the internet, the type of device, whether it's a smart speaker, whether it's a mobile phone, how you're connected to the internet, so the internet service provider or the operating system. All of these aspects can then change. And then, so those are the sort of data points we can serve from all of the campaigns, but then you have all of these other publisher data points potentially. So people like Pandora, people like Spotify will collect like which playlist you're listening to or your behavior on the app, the audience segment that you could be part of. And again, that could inform changes in the lines or the music or any of the element of the ad could change because of it. So that's what a dynamic ad is.
I hope you're enjoying the show. For more on sound and marketing, check out soundandmarketing.com. This is where I house all the good stuff, like articles that I reference, media that I'm a part of, courses on sound's power and influence in marketing, and pretty much everything else that has to do with sound in marketing. For sound strategy and sonic branding creation, my company, Dreamr Productions, would love to chat with you. Check out the end of the episode for contact information, or check out the show notes from this episode. We would love to help you make sound on purpose. Now back to the show. So you could potentially even change over the voice actor. Like, for example, you're in the UK, and if there's an ad being served in the UK, maybe you'd have somebody with a British accent. I'm in California, maybe you would have somebody from the West Coast or from America speaking, just to bring it all together to make you feel like comfortable in your environment. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And different languages, different accents. We've done different accents within the UK as well. The Scottish accent's very different from the English and the Welsh and the Northern Irish.
Yes.
But the other thing is, once you have a template set up, you can then easily, adapt it for different markets. And actually, the example I wanted to play so you can hear a dynamic ad, because I think hearing is the kind of the obvious way. So this is for Under Armour. And so we wrote this, and we've done lots of work with Under Armour in the UK, but we're currently working on a brief for this same brief for the US. So actually my US colleagues are writing and adapting this script for the US. So hopefully if you're listening across commercial audio in this winter, you might be served a similar ad to this, but with a US voiceover. But when you hear this, you'll hear lots of you'll hear it like a normal radio ad, but then there are lots of lines that will change with data. They're pretty obvious because what I'm trying to do with this is I'm layering up contextual data to make it feel personal. So imagine if you were actually out on a run while you're being served this ad.
Under Armour ask, what type of person are you? The type lying in bed thinking of running, or starting a week right, already 2K in?
The type that sees it's 2 degrees out, thinks forget it, or so what? Bring it on.
So which are you this Monday morning?
The type making excuses.
Or out pounding the streets of Bath, fully kitted out in Under Armour Rush cold gear. You give it all, we give it back.
Get winter ready with cold gear from underarmour.co.uk.
So the whole thinking about that is the mental battle we all have in our heads to go and do more exercise. So I imagined if I was lying in bed, so if that ad was served first thing in the morning and you were listening to your commercial audio, it would challenge you. It's like, you know, sometimes you're the person lying in bed, but sometimes you're the person out running. So why aren't you the one out running? And then it goes through the weather condition. So we had the live weather condition. We had the live temperature. I live near Bath in the UK. So that's why the location call out was Bath. And so all of that contextual data is there to layer up and challenge you. But then there are different lines for, are you at your desk? You know, rather than in bed, because you might not be in bed in the middle of the day, you might be at your desk, or you might be on the couch if it's the evening. And so you can hear how all of those lines can be different lines that are recorded, and then they have the data applied to them.
Very interesting. And do you have, like, how do you test these? Do you test them like geographically? Like how does the testing process go for this sort of thing?
Yeah, testing for audio is tricky, actually. I mean, we do a lot of testing, and we use a company called Attest, funnily enough. I always find it really tricky because for me, one of the key strengths of dynamic personalization is that you hear a different combination of those lines every time you're served an ad from the campaign. And when I worked in broadcast radio, where you'd often put out just one bit of copy for the entirety of a campaign, the one thing that would always come back in research is that people don't like the repetition of the same message. It's not how humans communicate. If I came to you and said the same thing over and over again, you'd think I was mad. You know, so in some ways, what we talk about is being more human, because actually humans do change how they talk about things, and that's hard to test, because when you play one bit of creative and you say, how does that compare to another bit of creative? What you're not taking into account is the entirety of a campaign where you would be served lots of different versions, and the cumulative effect of that happening. But we do research, we do A/B testing, we do that sort of stuff. But with audio, it is slightly tricky.
It is subjective, absolutely. Because I was thinking to myself for that ad, I am a runner, but I'm the one where it's like I have to roll out of bed and go. Before I convince myself out of it, I got to just go. And I feel like if I heard that, and this is just, I'm probably not the audience for this. If I heard this whole, like, because I'm competitive to myself and no one else. If somebody tells me what to do, I'm like, well, no, I'm not going. I'm not doing that.
The funny thing is that the US brief, the adaptation, has just taken into account exactly what you've just said, which has just blown my mind. In that it's absolutely right, because I think in the UK you can be a bit more assertive and we can be a bit more in your face. But the funny thing is the US Under Armour brand team were saying exactly what you were saying. Don't be quite as assertive and be a bit more relaxed about it. So that's great. We're on brief.
Interesting. I haven't talked to Under Armour. I'm not coordinating with them or anything. That's fascinating. What are some common misunderstandings in dynamic ads for you?
I mean, the obvious one is that there's something called dynamic ad insertion. So you'll hear Spotify talking about dynamic ad insertion, and that's that gets confused with fully dynamic ads because it's the word dynamic. And dynamic ad insertion is where you have a podcast like yours, and rather than having a baked in like host read, the ad spot is dynamically inserted, so even your back catalog can be updated with the most relevant and up-to-date campaigns. So that's what that means. And people sometimes confuse dynamic ads with the inserted ads. But generally, there isn't a huge amount of misunderstanding. There is an education job that we do for the market, in that we go out and we explain what dynamic advertising is. And And that goes back to what I was saying about the psychology. I always talk about the three sort of drivers to human attention. The first is personal relevance. Now, you heard of the cocktail party effect by Cherry and Broadbent, were two psychologists that talked about the cocktail party effect, where someone mentions your name at a busy, noisy cocktail party and you automatically get drawn to the conversation, even if you weren't part of it. What that proves is something called selective attention. So the human brain is analyzing huge amounts of data every moment of every day, and we filter what is important and what's not. And personal relevance, starting at the peak of that, being your name, grabs your attention. But it could also be where you're from, or, like the football team you support, or, an interest of yours, a passion of yours, because they will always drive your attention. The second thing is contextual relevance. Now, this isn't a passion point. It could be that it's raining today. That's contextual to your life. Do you need an umbrella, or is it sunscreen because it's so hot? So that's contextual. But also, if you were going on, let's say, a motorway, the I-95 or something, and the radio was on and it said, oh, there are problems on the I-95, you would automatically go, hold on, did they just say there were problems on the I-95? Now, that's not a passion point. Again, it's a contextual relevance. You're going on that freeway and you want to know if it's going to be a problem. And the third thing is when things are a threat to you, so loud bangs on the street or things that are unusual or unexpected will grab your attention. But those three things, you think the contextual relevance and personal relevance is what we can apply with data, and so that's what we talk about a lot about, is educating the market and saying, why don't you think about approaching it this way, because of these reasons why we know it chimes with human psychology.
Tune in next week for the conclusion to our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe on all the major podcast channels. Share with friends, follow, and rate. Spread the word because, well, more people should know about this stuff. I know you know that now. For those of you wanting more information on how sonic branding and sound marketing can be utilized within your brand, my company, Dreamr Productions, would love to help you out. We create, consult, and help strategize on how sound can be a more active presence in your marketing. We help you make sound on purpose. For inquiries, go to dreamrproductions.com. That's DREAMR Productions.com, and send us a message. You can also find me, Jeanna Isham, on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. All links will be provided in the show notes. Let's make this world of sound more intriguing, more unique, and more on brand.